So you saw the thumbnail. What's the answer? Basically, I'm going to argue that the term melodic death metal is a bit misleading, using a couple riffs from one of my all-time favorite melodeath albums, which is the classic A Celebration of Guilt by Arsis. And in particular, I'm going to be looking at maybe my favorite track on the album, although really this album is an oops all bangers situation. I'm going to try to go a little slower than I normally do in these videos. I think the tone I tend to take is kind of a weird mix of how I would present a conference paper and how I teach undergrads, which probably often ends up being frustrating for almost everyone. So this one at least is going to take things at a little more basic level. So anyway, in a nutshell, I think that the thing that sets melodic death metal apart from other death metal actually has a lot more to do with harmony, meter, and form than melody. Part of this is because melody is not a rigorously defined music theory term, kind of like syncopation or polyrhythm or tone. It's a word that it's easy to give examples of, but music theorists don't normally use because it covers such a broad and diverse set of things. In a lot of music, melody refers to what the vocalist is doing, but that's not the case in melodic death metal because almost as a rule, melodic death metal still has harsh vocals. In music without vocals, it refers to the main line, which is often the highest in pitch, and in the most traditional sense of the word melody, it's something that's pretty singable, something that moves mostly by step within a moderate pitch range, moves at moderate speed, and leaves space for breathing, etc. Some melodeath riffs are like this, but definitely not all of them, and maybe not even more than in other death metal. You can definitely have melodies in so-called dissonant death metal, for example, like that one I love in the Artificial Brains song, A Lofty Grave. And plenty of melodeath riffs are not very singable. Either they're pretty repetitive or pretty disjointed or too fast or too continuous, etc., like the verse riff from Maddening Disdain. So if it's not really melody that sets melodeath apart as a subgenre, what is it? My answer is that melodeath is very inside the box, metrically and harmonically, in a way that sets it apart from other death metal. Metrically, this means that stuff is nearly always in 4, with 2s and 4s all the way up and down from there. So beats divided into 4, sometimes the beat's divided into 3, but generally, you have the beat divided into 4, and then the beat is grouped into 4, and those measures are grouped into 4s to create sections or phrases, and maybe 8s, 16s, whatever, but it's all this very kind of square structure. I should also mention, just something that I didn't realize until I started playing guitar and didn't believe in even when I first started playing guitar is like these really fast gallops in between in the notes. Like you'll see when I play it slow, that's actually what's happening. It's like ba ba da bum ba da ba ba da bum ba da ba ba da bum ba da. But when it's really fast, it's like you can't even hear that. But that's kind of also what supercharges this. The momentum here is ba ba da bum ba da ba ba da bum ba da ba ba da bum ba da bum ba da ba da bum 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 ba da ba da ba da. of time talking about metal where this isn't the case, where things are all sorts of weird on this channel. But this kind of square organization is actually the norm in a lot of metal and most popular music more generally. If you didn't know, now you know, and you can take it for a spin yourself next time you're listening to something in the kind of pop music world. This is also why a lot of this music sounds pretty predictable, because even if you're not sure or you're not aware that you're counting, you've probably picked up on these patterns and you know to expect these kind of groups of 2 and groups of 4 and groups of 8 at the various levels of things. Harmonically, being inside the box means that this music, melodic death metal, is almost always tonal. That it uses a major, or much more often a minor scale, in a way that creates a strong center of tonal gravity based on expectations that we've built up from listening to these same patterns in a huge amount of music. So in this song, the very first thing we hear is a big dominant chord, followed by a descending 5-4-3 motion and a turnaround figure to return to that starting point. So to kind of slow down, this song is in D minor. My guitar's in D standard, so it looks like E minor. It's a D minor scale. So we have this big A major chord, A, C sharp. Well, really it's voiced A, C sharp, A. The E is implied in that chord. And that's this kind of point of tension, and then it resolves immediately to this clear minor thing. And when I say 5-4-3, that's referring to the scale motion. So the 5th degree of a D minor scale is an A, so it's going A, G, F, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-ba, A, G, F, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. The verse riff also has these similar kind of chord structures where it goes, from 1 to flat 7, this common kind of rock minor chord thing, and then 1, flat 7, flat 6, another kind of common rock chord thing, but it always keeps landing back on 1, and you don't have to wait very long for things to resolve. It's kind of like, especially because the tempo is so fast, you're always circling back to the tonic. And the really catchy chorus riff moves from a 1 chord to a flat 7 chord with a prominent scale degree 2 on the turnaround, which then loops back nicely to the start. So pretty much all the riffs in this song and in this subgenre will be based on this sort of harmonic shape, which keeps the forward momentum going, because the riffs are always pulling back to their own starting place or to the start of the next one. Harmonically, you're always kind of ending the phrase with a dominant and then starting again on the tonic. So here are those things for the first several riffs of this song, which is a lot of fun to listen to and a lot of fun to play. Those gallops are really fast. Scholar Keith Con Harris has an influential theory about metal culture, where there are basically two ways to get subcultural capital, aka the recognition of your peers, aka clout. And he calls these two ways mundane and transgressive subcultural capital. Mundane subcultural capital comes from knowing metal history and band trivia and subgenre classifications and everything really well, from being a good scene member, from knowing what metal is cool and what isn't, all that kind of stuff. Transgressive subcultural capital comes from expanding the boundaries of metal, from doing something new and sometimes scandalous, from having unique opinions, stuff like that. I think there's a lot of discourse in metal glorifying transgressive subcultural capital. Stuff about individuality and experimentation and all of that. But it's also true that a lot of really good metal is not super concerned with that. And I think like on this channel, I tend to kind of champion these really out there bands and these really complicated things and pushing in new directions. So, here I'm talking instead about Arsis, a band that, especially on this first album, things got a little more technical later, but they're just focused on really fine-tuning things within a couple of pretty well-defined parameters. And I think making a really good melodeath album that sounds both fresh and familiar and has this like lightning in a bottle momentum is just as hard as making something super out there and experimental sound good. I don't know, what do you think? And what are your all-time favorite melodeath albums? And why is it all of the Black Dahlia Murder albums? And oh yeah, one more thing. See ya.